Hi, I'm Dina Marie, the host of the Twisted Philly podcast, and I've got a question for you. Do you love podcasts? Because I sure do. And that's why the podcast community, Podcast We Listen To, is hosting their very first podcast convention for listeners. It's called Podern Love. The Podern Love convention is for listeners by listeners. It's for all of us, and it includes podcasts from every genre you could imagine, including comedy, movies and TV, pop culture, paranormal, history, health and fitness, true crime, and so many more. Our first convention is August 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2018, in one of the coolest cities in the country, New Orleans, Louisiana. And it's being held at the Intercontinental Hotel, which is a premier French Quarter hotel. The location is amazing, and the room rate can't be beat either. It's only $129 a night. Tickets are on sale on the website at www.podern.love. That's www.podern.love. There are over 40 independent podcasts already lined up to present at Podern Love, and we'll be adding more before the convention. Plus, featured podcasters have discount codes, so you can get a discount on your tickets. Be sure to follow Podern Love on Twitter and Facebook for the latest convention updates, news, information about new shows that are joining, and links to a dedicated website just for Podern Love attendees to book their hotel room. We can't wait to see you this August in New Orleans.
Hi, and welcome to the Vocal Fries Podcast, the podcast about linguistic discrimination.
I'm Carrie Gillen.
And I'm Megan Figueroa. Well, cunt.
Wow.
Just right out of the gate.
I mean, we might as well talk about that. I do have some housekeeping I do want to bring up that I forgot to mention, but we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
So yes, this word has come back into the consciousness because of Samantha Bee.
Yeah.
Calling Ivanka Trump a feckless cunt.
Right.
Which somehow softens it a little.
Yeah.
The feckless does.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's talk about the reaction to it.
Yeah. Because people were adding us on Twitter and, you know.
Right, which makes sense. I mean, we've talked about it before, the word.
Yeah, was it our fourth episode when we talked about swearing? Third or fourth? I think it was fourth.
Third or fourth.
Yeah. Right, so cunt is the one that's like a sheath. Right? Like the etymology was...
No.
Is that...
No, that's vagina.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, cunt is the old English word.
Okay.
For vagina.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And a thing that I always forget because I'm American, so I don't think about anyone beside myself and my country, is that cunt is not as offensive of a word in other parts of the world.
No.
So
yeah, in North America, it's really quite offensive and is a slur in some cases.
Right.
But basically, the rest of the English-speaking world, as far as I understand, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the confusion were people saying this, all swear words are slurs now. No.
Right.
It's a slur only because of who it targets and how it's used.
Right.
But that's only really true in North America, as far as I understand.
Right. And since it was a woman calling a woman this word, it is different than a man using the word to denigrate a woman.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely different.
Right.
I mean, I try not to use misogynistic language at women like that.
Right.
So, I don't usually call women bitches or things like that. I'll use the word bitches.
Yeah.
Or I might say someone's a boss bitch, like,
yeah.
because there's like,
yeah.
Right? But not like, you bitch. Right. So I wouldn't choose to use this word in this way.
Right.
It's still a lot less offensive from a woman than it is from a man. And also we have to take into consideration the power differential here. At worst, they're at the same level. At worst.
Right.
That doesn't seem as bad as if she had directed it at someone who had a lot less power than her.
Right.
Or was a different race.
Right.
So I just think it's a lot more complicated than saying, oh, it's totally fine, or, oh, it's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Or it's just as bad as calling a black person an ape. No!
Right. No, that's... Yeah, no, like Rebecca Tracer said in the cut, it was like Samantha Bee was using the word for marginalized communities, like, because she was talking about immigration and how fucking terrible it was for Ivanka to tweet a photo
Yes.
at that specific time of what was happening in the world, and the hashtag where are the children. Again, it goes back to power, and it's really complicated. There's shades of gray, right?
Yeah, so part of me understands people who are like, you should never use this word in this way. Okay, maybe that is true. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But part of me is like, but if there's ever a time we can use it, it's when we're punching up. And she was definitely, in my opinion, punching up.
Yes, she was punching up. I think we should end it with the best response, in my opinion, which is Sally Field, who tweeted, I like Samantha Bee a lot, but she is flat wrong to call Ivanka a cunt. Cunts are powerful, beautiful, nurturing, and honest. So here we're seeing some like reclamation of a slur, right? So
yeah. And well, in that case, the way she's using it is not a slur. So like using the word cunt to describe anatomy is not a slur.
Yeah, good point.
You might think it's vulgar or a swear word, fine, but it's not. That is not a slur. So she's reclaiming that aspect of it.
Good point.
I definitely think we should do that.
Yes.
Definitely we should reclaim it in that way. And then if we want to extend it as like it shouldn't have as much power as it does as a slur, that's harder work.
Yes.
But anyway, I thought it was very clever, and I loved that response.
Me too. And I didn't even know Sally Field was like on Twitter, so
no, I didn't either.
So bless her for being on Twitter and doing that.
It also reminds me of I think it's Dan Savage who says this. Maybe he got it from somewhere else originally, so apologies if that's the case. But one of my favorite things that he's ever said is, or he says constantly, is, you know, pussies are strong. They push out babies. So if you call someone a pussy, it should have the opposite meaning than people intend.
It should, yeah. But we hate women.
So we should call them scrotums instead, because scrotums are weak.
Oh, we've used a lot of words that might make people uncomfortable, so you're welcome.
I kind of feel like if you're not up for that kind of talk, you're probably not listening to this.
That's true.
Okay, so we have some housekeeping. As we mentioned last time, we're going to be at the Potter and Love Convention in New Orleans in August, from August 10th to the 12th. And if you want to join us, there's a 10% off ticket sales code, and it's VOCAL, VOCAL. So that would be awesome if you wanted to come and meet us or meet other podcasters. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of people there, so I'm excited.
It's gonna be fun. And we're going to do a live show there.
We are. That is the plan. We have not gotten any of the details down yet, but we are planning on a live show. Hopefully that does work out.
Fingers crossed.
If you're from New Orleans and you have something interesting to say about language, can you please email us at vocalfriespod@gmail.com? Because it would be awesome to have someone local to talk to.
Another housekeeping, we are on Patreon. So if you are so inclined to help an indie podcast, you can find us on Patreon.
The URL is patreon.com/vocalfriespod. So very easy to find.
Yeah. And I just want everyone to know the type of sacrifices that we put forth for our art. We turn off our ACs to record so it sounds more professional. And we live in fucking Arizona.
In Central and South Arizona.
And shit is hot. Hot.
It's so hot. So the other way, if you don't feel comfortable giving us a monthly payment, which I totally understand.
Yeah.
You can also just, throw us a couple bucks, through coffee. Basically pay for a coffee for one of us, and that'd be nice as well.
Yes, exactly.
So we also had an email from Charlie Lloyd, who had some questions about the non-binary pronoun use. I don't want to read the whole email. It's kind of long, but he says, it occurred to me that despite growing up with a fairly conservative variety of British English and not knowing that trans people existed until I was in my late teens, that's kind of normal for many of us. I have always used singular they, specifically for people whose gender was unknown. Yes, that's a pretty standard use of it. So rather than writing him or her or his, her, I'd always write them and their, and much to the distaste of high school English teachers. You sort of touched this on this in the episode and made it clear that this usage is very different from the kind of usage that trans people are asking for, but I wanted to mention my experience because British English has a reputation for being incredibly conservative, especially the standard. But I was never told by my family to change this practice despite other prescriptivism being present. I wonder if there's been any research on the subject of singular they in various regional varieties of English. Is the British English more accepting of it, or am I barking totally up the wrong tree? And I want to say, I don't know if there's any research.
Yeah, I don't know.
But my guess is your family's not going to pick on your speech. There's a difference between how we speak and how we write. Mm-hmm. So your teachers are picking on your writing, and your family would be picking on your speech, usually. Sometimes family members get involved with, like, reading your writing, but generally that's the case. So if they were only listening to you speak, they might not even notice you using singular they that way, because that's way more accepted than it is in writing.
Yeah.
But if there is research on, like, acceptability in terms of regions, I would love to hear it. So please let us know.
Yeah. And then we'll share.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm sorry we didn't get to your entire email, but we're happy that you emailed us. And please, if any of you have questions, feel free to email us at vocalfriespod@gmail.com, or, give us a shout on our Facebook page or on Twitter.
Yeah. We respond usually. Unless we miss something, but
yeah, sometimes I think things get missed, but generally speaking, especially in Facebook, I think it's harder to. Well, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes Facebook eats things.
Yeah, like our souls.
Oh my god. Okay. Well. And the episode today is about ed tech.
And I think a lot of us have some sort of experience with it. So
So hopefully it's interesting. And keep sending in questions or suggestions. We love to hear from you.
All right. Thanks. So today we are joined by Joan Palmiter Bajorek. She is a PhD candidate in the Second Language Acquisition and Teaching program at the University of Arizona, and she is interested in educational tech and speech technology. So thank you so much, Joan, for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and it's so funny. It's like perfect day to have you because I just got an email from Duolingo, and we'll get into why that's perfect, but I got an email from Duolingo that's like, big changes, like, it's better. We're better now. And so that's kind of the educational tech field that we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's get into it then. So could you explain a little bit what educational tech is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So educational technology, or ed tech, is a field where we talk about technology supporting learning in more sophisticated ways that you could probably do from a human. So like in a classroom, you might like have a textbook that has like fill in the blank exercises, but through language technology and ed tech, we can do more sophisticated things with speech, with machine learning, with multimodal, we frequently talk about. So you can hear things, you can see things, there are videos built in. So it's really using tech as a support tool for learning.
Cool.
Yeah, perfect. And so is there science that says that this is a good way to learn?
That's a great question, and a question that I struggle with in my field because so many products are proliferating right now. The amount of new technologies and software we have is huge. The amount of research being done on the outcomes for actual students barely exists. So when I do research, I definitely see that students definitely feel supported and that they think this technology is helping them. But I would love to see more empirical research that demonstrates exactly what those outcomes look like.
Yeah, that's very important because I hadn't really thought of that, but I don't know anything that's shown that these products actually work. And I've always had a suspicion that they're not that helpful. Like, I've used Duolingo because I was trying to learn a little bit more Spanish, and yeah, I know more vocabulary now, but
right.
Yeah.
And that's, I think what's really important to me is like what your actual goals are. Like what claims are made by the company and what are you using the technology for specifically? And if you want to beef up your Spanish vocabulary, awesome. You know, Duolingo could support you in doing that. But if they make other claims that potentially aren't supported, that's where I have issue with these companies.
yeah, same.
Yeah. And do you feel like they are making claims?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
do a quick search online and see what kind of things they say about what their product can and cannot do. It's a fun time. As a researcher, I get lots of kicks and giggles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I bet there are a lot of our listeners, because I think that, I mean, we're using Duolingo as an example, but I think we use it because it's so, like, I think everyone knows what Duolingo is. We say Duolingo, and you may have an app on your phone or on your computer, or you've at least heard a friend talking about it. Everyone knows what Duolingo is.
It also gets posted a lot, like examples, like example sentences that are really ridiculous. Like, why would you ever need to know this in any language, let alone a second language?
Yes.
I wish I could think of an example now.
There's a whole Twitter. There's a whole Twitter on it, and they're so hilarious. And sometimes it matches up with whatever picture in a hilarious way, you know? So,
well, I think that's something pretty impressive about Duolingo is they're a relatively new company, and that they're already pretty much a household name is pretty impressive. I think 2011 is when they officially launched. So it's 2018 right now. And the fact that we all know about them, I think they did some good marketing.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
No, I thought that they were older than that. Yeah, there's a Twitter called Shit Duolingo Says. Which, yes. Oh my gosh, one of them, the first one that came up was, "You must be tired from running through my mind all day."
Well, I guess that's the thing that people do say, at least.
It's
like,
true.
there are examples that are just things that are never said. Or you would never expect them to be said.
Like, "Where can we hide the bodies?" which is another one. That can be useful.
Again,
useful.
I'm certain that's been used.
Joan, do you know how those sentences, is it like data mining? How those are created?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the interesting things that not all companies share where or how they choose to curate their content. But Duolingo, first and foremost, is a big data company. So even though they're a multilingual data company, those are not potentially sentences curated by actual humans.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think the question that we want to ask, because of the type of podcast we are about linguistic discrimination, is, okay, so I have Duolingo on my phone, and I'm trying to learn more Spanish, at least vocabulary, because it does help with that. The little flag that it uses is Spain.
Yes.
So tell me about that. How come it's the Spanish, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. This is a question I ask many companies, and most of them laugh. And the biggest concept, I think a lot of companies know that this is a thing, or they have to make choices, right? They choose that image when they put on the Spanish, right? I also see this for English, that they have the British flag. When it comes to British English, even if the language they're actually teaching is American English or New Zealander, you know, and so forth. It's really about prestige dialects is what I would say. And especially if it's big data content, they are probably not only using Castilian Spanish, despite whichever flag they use.
Right.
So,
right. And can you tell us just what prestige dialects is for the listeners?
Oh, yeah. So I think about this a lot in my work, which languages we choose to teach and learn around the world. And for example, when people want to learn English and they want to improve their English, they're probably not interested in a Mississippi accent. They're probably more interested in learning a affluent speaker dialect of the English language. And so those we call them prestige or lower prestige. We can talk about that different. Yes, that's what I want to say about prestige dialects.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before, right, Carrie? Yeah, go.
Yeah, we have. I was just going to say this leads into a question about your past. So you taught French. Oh, sorry, you taught English in France, right?
Yes.
Yes, and like this whole idea of prestige dialects comes into play here, right? So can you talk about your experience in France and teaching English there?
Absolutely. And I think it would be a big statement to say that I taught English. I would say that I was mostly a cultural liaison. Just to be clear about what my actual role was. It was kind of like Teach for America, but in France. I don't know if you know about TFA. Yeah. Okay. So I worked at 3 underserved middle schools, and I was teaching. I was working on English with a lot of students, and we would be practicing sentences like, "Oh, you need to take your schedules and walk down the corridor and talk to the headmaster." And I was like, "This is not American English." Right? Like I was frequently, implicitly and explicitly told that I spoke a non-prestige dialect. And at one point was told that I spoke vulgar English, which I wanted to die laughing. I was like, really? Like I've never been told before that I spoke vulgar English as my native language dialect. So I'm originally from Portland, Oregon. I've lived most of as I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. So that's where I'm from originally.
Yeah, I think a lot of American English speakers, at least quote unquote standard American English speakers, have never heard that they speak a vulgar version of English.
Right.
We're not used to being told that our dialect is somehow not as good. I mean, that's a problem too, but it's interesting to me to hear that.
Yeah, if you watch like the news about English language, you'll notice that if anything coming from say the UK, Americans are ruining English. So it's a thing that exists out there, but Americans don't tend to read international venues as much, so they don't realize that they're being denigrated.
Well, and it also makes sense for French learners that they would want to learn a British accent or those lexical items, because that might be the population they would be interacting with if they wanted jobs in London, right? Yes. So it definitely makes sense for practical reasons in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's true of so if you are taking English, say, in an African country, they learn British English too.
Yes, that's what I understand.
Yeah.
And it used to be the case in Asia as well, that the British version was the more prestigious one, but more recently it switched to American. So at least in some of the Asian countries. I shouldn't make a blanket claim.
Right. Yeah, and I guess the same could be said about Castilian Spanish. But like you said, even though it has the Spanish flag on, say, Duolingo's app, it's not like they're teaching us vosotros or something that Spaniards use, right? So I thought that was really interesting. And they must have made a conscious decision to use that flag.
Absolutely.
It would be hard to choose between any of the other Spanish language speaking countries, though. So
true.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, actually. At least in my experience, when we're talking about pedagogical materials, they're teaching kind of like a Mexican standard.
Okay.
And if I were designing that product, that's what I would put the flag of. But that's a personal choice, clearly.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I guess if it really is Mexican or most closely related to Mexican, then yes, that would make sense. But if they're trying to be more general, which I guess would be difficult, then I would be like, well, which would you choose? I don't know. Anyway.
But I guess that's a decision that goes further back. So, like when they're creating what materials come out on Duolingo, are they choosing, like Guatemalan or whatever?
Well, and where are they getting their data from? Probably a more affluent user base. And that may be from Europe and not from Mexico. I don't know that data. So.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's a good point. So if they're data mining, then they need somewhere where they're getting a lot of data.
And I doubt that's geotagged. I would bet you a lot that it isn't.
Ah. Okay.
For example, my professor does research in Welsh. And there's clearly in Wales, there's a large population, but there's also a population in Argentina. And depending on where you get your Twitter data from, that could be significantly varied in the usage of that language.
Right.
Wow. Okay, so you don't think it's geotagged. That's interesting.
Well, it depends on where they get their data from. If they shared that with me, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. And so do you think that's a problem then?
Is it a problem?
when they're creating these apps and they're telling people that they're learning Welsh, and then you go to an actual Welsh speaker, a native Welsh speaker. I know that for Welsh, it's usually you're usually bilingual in Spanish and Welsh or English and Welsh. But if you go to a Welsh speaker and they're native and they're like, we don't say that here, is that a problem, or what do you think?
Oh, they can definitely understand each other, but I think there are cultural positionings. You know what I mean? Like if you chose to learn one version, I think there are implications to the choices we make when we learn second languages and which dialect of those languages. And that has a lot of meaning and cultural impact when you use that language in certain ways.
Speaking of cultural impact, one of the cool things that I think that Rosetta Stone's doing is that they have a Navajo version now.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about today. Is related to the choice of languages you support, which has been very controversial in different softwares. For example, for Duolingo, just going back to Duolingo really quickly, that they support like Klingon and they support like High Valyrian, but they don't support languages from the Philippines. Like it's interesting the choices they make. And Rosetta Stone supporting Navajo is a statement. You know, it's not it's a specific choice that they chose to make. And props to them for doing so, because it's not easy to support languages like that. So
yeah, if I know anything about anything, it's that Athabascan languages are really complicated.
Yeah.
The verbs, oh my.
And the whole way that Rosetta Stone is set up is that it's trying to get you to learn implicitly, right?
Yes.
And I have a hard time believing, well, science tells me that there's just adults are not going to learn these things implicitly.
Well, I don't know about that. So I sat in on a demonstration of a Navajo immersion class, and they said they had a rock and a stick, and then they said, I wish I could remember, but I don't. You know, I'm holding a rock versus I'm holding a stick, and in Navajo, the verbs are different depending on the type of handling you're doing. So holding a rock is one form of the verb, and holding a stick is a different form of the verb. And so, I picked up. Of course, I'm a linguist, but I picked up on the difference, and I don't think it's impossible. I think maybe it's more difficult. You're right. On a computer versus in person, I don't know, but it is possible.
Yeah. And it was terrible of me as a scientist to say something so strong. But yeah, no, it's much harder for adults to learn implicitly.
Probably so.
Yeah.
And I think most data would support the idea that, especially for adult learners, some explicit content is very helpful.
Right.
But I do agree that being immersed in the language is so key for being able to use it instinctually. And if that's one of your goals, then immersive experiences. I don't know about completely implicit material. I wouldn't support that. But I think having a strong combination of both is the best pedagogy.
Right. And just aside from pedagogy, it's great that Rosetta Stone has Navajo. Are they working on any other native languages, Carrie? Do you know?
I think so, but I don't remember what they are, so I don't want to say.
Yeah. Okay, so we keep saying Duolingo. There's one called Mango too, right?
Yes.
So I'm wondering, like, if I'm a user and I'm trying to choose between these, is there a true difference? Like, if I try to learn Spanish from Mango versus Duolingo?
Yes, there's a significant difference.
Oh, okay.
I did a huge research project on these 4 big companies. So Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, Mango Languages, and Babbel, which provide significantly different content for users and different ways of interacting with it. Mango Languages is mostly through public libraries and subscription services. And I think they do a fantastic job at specializing and also working on, if we're talking about explicit content, like color form mapping for pronunciation and morphology choices. They do a really cool job. And they also do, like, you want to learn medical Spanish? Like, let's just focus on that topic, which I think could be very appealing to certain users.
That's really cool.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Ooh, that'd be really important for nursing. Oh, I bet. And if they have a law version too, people that are working
well, that's
in courts.
Big field right now. Instead of just learning whatever Spanish, I need it for this specific purpose tomorrow. Help me improve my skills.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great application.
Yeah. I really respect that company. The more I learned about it, the more I like them. Go Mango Languages.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not paying for this. Just
no, they are.
Yes, they are.
I also would love to talk about Babbel, which is one of my top companies when we're talking about. So I focus a lot on speech technology, and when it comes to why you learn a language, I fundamentally believe that grammar and vocab is not the top priority. I really believe that when people want to learn languages for real, they want to speak it, they want to listen, they want to communicate effectively. And Babbel puts speaking at the forefront, no question. You have to speak to finish the lessons. You know what I mean? Like, it's built in to learning vocab. It's built into everything.
Well, when I'm in Duolingo, I always turn like the part off where I have to speak.
Yes.
Yeah, so do I, because I also did French just to try and brush up on my French. And it couldn't understand me at all. And I'm like, okay, I know my accent's not great, but it's not that bad. So I was like, what's going on with this product? Now, this was a couple of years ago now, so maybe it's better. But so I'm wondering, like, how is Babbel handling us better?
Well, I would first say that none of them do it perfectly, and none of them do it as well as I wish they would. And they know this. I've written constructive criticism. This is not new news. Speech technology, why? The first thing to say is that you're not alone in that a lot of people turn off the speaking things on Duolingo. From the stuff I see, over 70% of users choose to turn that off. So there was a New York Times article actually about this woman who completed Duolingo, quote unquote, and never spoke a word of the language she was supposedly learning. So I think that those are choices made by the developers and by the company related to, again, the outcomes for the users, right? Like, this is something you have to question. The fact that Babbel requires you to speak is a different type of intention.
Yeah. That would be good for me because I avoid it, mostly because I'm like, you asshole Duolingo. I said it perfectly. But
Well, yeah, so we know already that automatic speech recognition is not that great yet. And so adding on top of it being your second language, I assume it does a bad job of that.
Yeah.
This is something, the more I read about, the more terrified I am that this is being used for assessment purposes.
Same.
Yes.
You had Rachel Tapman come speak, and her work is so compelling about this. But especially working in language learning and language assessment, if we know that these assessment techniques are not fair, they potentially are not valid, they're giving native speakers bad scores. The fact that immigration services use these to discriminate on who can and cannot move places or jobs. I mean, it gets really problematic really fast. But I think when we're talking about using it for Duolingo or using it for Babbel or whatnot, they are making what I call threshold choices of what is an acceptable utterance target. And of course, this is even more problematic for women or people who have breathier voices, right? Which they don't tell their users, of course.
Right.
But I think making those back-end choices that significantly impact users, you've got to be really thoughtful about what you're doing.
Yeah, and you might be giving the wrong message because, again, if you're trying to learn a language as an adult, there are going to be some sounds that you might not ever be able to make, like the trill R, right?
There actually I work on pronunciation, so I would refute that point. I know a lot of people believe that, but my research indicates that if you give people evidence-based material that's specific about different, you're talking about a phoneme, like your tongue doing specific things, you can improve. It's just that if you never get practice, you never get feedback, and it's not based on anything real, no, you won't improve, right? I mean, you need to be supported in your learning overall.
But how does that play out? play out in how Duolingo recognizes you learning these phonemes or these sounds.
I think they care more about amplitude and duration segmentation. I don't think they care if you can do I have not seen their material, but considering the other research I've done, that's what I would guess is actually going on.
Yeah, and so now I'm thinking that's what I mean when I say that as an adult trying to improve on these things, I feel like Duolingo or these things aren't going to...
Absolutely. They can't really. They don't have the space to teach you, right? Because you do need like actual, like here's what your tongue is doing information, and they don't provide that kind of thing. I remember when I was learning French as, a kid and then a teenager, I just couldn't figure out what was going on with the vowels at all. And then when I got into linguistics, I was like, oh, there are front-rounded vowels. I understand now. I do think that just giving information. So also, I learned a bunch of sounds for the indigenous languages that I've worked on that are not part of my native phonology. You can definitely learn them. It's just a matter of, well, I guess a little bit of wanting to, but also understanding what you're actually doing with your mouth.
Well, and yes, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry if I said that you can't learn new sounds. I did not mean that.
No, you're not the only one. People tell me that every day of the week. And as a researcher in this field, I also have to be really careful because it's a pronunciation and an identity are so closely tied that you can so easily offend people with this material. So I think what I have to say is, as a linguist, as someone who works in this field, I'm telling you, I can empower you to learn better if that's one of your goals. I can give you strategic material. If that's not one of your goals, no worries, but you can't. I would, please don't say that you can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's kind of like saying you can't do math. Yes, you can. You've just been told all your life you can't. It's a lie.
Well, and no one gives you practice. Like literally you turn off the thing that potentially could help you at all to speak the language.
Yeah.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Yeah.
But I'd love to at least talk about, there are companies that are dealing with pronunciation specifically. Most of them aren't integrated into other speech technology software. So when we're talking about regular ed tech, these companies do not focus on this material. There's a company I really respect called Elsa. It's from San Francisco, spelled just like the Disney princess, but all caps. And they work on phoneme segmentation for English. It's slightly problematic. They have a quote-unquote native speaker score. Yeah. But they do very sophisticated analyses. Like I got a 97% on their diagnostic test, and I have supposedly a problem with my schwa. I don't know what my problem is.
What? First of all, schwas are all over the place, and secondly, what?
But I mean, 97% is not a bad score if we're talking about validity of scores and ratings.
Absolutely, that's true.
So,
yeah. No, you bring up a good point about identity and pronunciation, and this is the big reason why I turn off the speaking part, is because it makes me feel so much shame that I have to speak a little bit slower when I do encounter something like the Spanish trilled R, because when it's like embedded in a word, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And some Spanish words have so many syllables, and I'm like, I should be able to say this better or faster. I shouldn't have to stop. And I think that's a big thing that I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. What's that?
I was just gonna say that's an interesting language ideology that you have in your head, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not coming from nowhere. There are so many Spanish speakers, native Spanish speakers, other Mexican Americans or Mexicans that say that I should be able to speak Spanish, since, my dad speaks Spanish.
Yeah, I think heritage identity, I don't know if you consider yourself, that's a personal identity choice, clearly. But when we're talking, my master's thesis that I did at the University of California, Davis, I looked at pronunciation and confidence in heritage and non-heritage speakers. And by a large margin, we saw that heritage speakers always rated their pronunciation as significantly worse than non-heritage speakers, which doesn't make sense. If you're speaking Spanish at home, your pronunciation is probably better than your non-heritage peers, but it's the way you feel about it that matters, right? Yep. So you're not alone. You're definitely not alone.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. No, I bet that speaks to some people that are trying to learn like their heritage language or get better, or
And a lot of my colleagues at the University of Arizona are on green cards and not native speakers of English. So English is their professional language. And I asked some of my colleagues to take some diagnostic tests, and they were very uncomfortable with that idea.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, because most of their life they're currently spending in English, but their pronunciation is a huge identity question of how good am I, is the concept. But they're intelligible. They're professionals in their field. Does it matter what kind of accent they have? So that speaks, if they're intelligible, why does it matter, or how does it matter to who they are?
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that there are people like you that are interested in ed tech and like Duolingo and all these things that are also interested in like cultural identity or identity of the speaker. These are important things. And that's why we need linguists at these companies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just like, maybe one day, like my friends are always picking up other languages. They're like, I'm going to learn, Dutch or whatever. Just there's no like heritage or like cultural significance for them. But I can't do that because I'm so stuck on the idea that I need to learn Spanish, and I don't even want to, go into any other languages. And I would be happy if these companies, started talking about, I don't know, the cultural significance of learning different languages and all of this. And I don't really see that yet.
No, I don't see it much either. But I think what's really important is when people ask me about edtech companies, as a user, as a consumer, you have so much power. Like, I think people are not realizing that you vote with your dollar. And depending on which of these companies you support or the tools you choose to buy, and tweet about and so forth, you have a lot of power to say, hey, I'd love to see more of this kind of material in your product. Why did you choose to do this and that? I love that Duolingo has lots of different faces in their software. They have different skin tones.
Yeah.
They have multiracial couples that seem to be appearing. There's a smiling Sikh man in their software, which sends a very strong message about the kind of company they are. So I think as consumers, you choose. Tell them what you want. Tell them what you need and what you support, what your fundamental values are. Because they do change their material all the time. Trust me. I talk to them.
Yeah. The latest email I got says, meet the new Duolingo, twice as much learning content, and you can focus on your favorites. So you can choose what to learn super deeply now. I could, these are good upgrades, and I can see how they would be responsive to user feedback.
Is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with?
I was just going to say, I know nothing. Thank you for teaching me.
Oh, not at all.
That has become my...
your mantra.
Aside from like, don't be an asshole, is I know nothing. Thank you. But it was the same when we had Rachel on. So you mentioned Rachel's episode. That was episode 6. So listeners, if you haven't listened to that, these 2 episodes will pair nicely, like wine and chocolate. And also,
the other one that we'll pair with is the episode with Ethan Kutlu, who talks about foreign accented speech and how discriminated people can be for having an accent, a particular accent.
Yeah, definitely. It's all related, right?
It absolutely
intersects.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is the concept. So we're talking about educational technology, but also about speech technology and choices that are being made. And I love EdTech, but I currently am pivoting more into speech technology in general when it comes to voice assistance. As voice is being integrated as a user interface, how, Alexa and Google Homes are becoming more and more prevalent. NPR just did a study with the Edison Group that now 1 in 6 Americans owns what's called a smart speaker.
Wow.
Which, of course, is just a certain type of American, right? That's not all American. Like if we're talking about demographics and socioeconomic status, 1 in 6
a
of
large percentage.
Certain people. But I think when we talk about choices that are being made in the future of this field, it's really about the native language and speech technology. And I'm hearing a lot of stuff about privacy questions. which there's a totally different discussion, but is also a really important one when we're talking about big data companies and what they're doing with the data we give them or choose not to give them.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
That's a whole other topic that I am really fascinated in, but...
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, but I think I just want to say that those are connected. No, I want to make sure that that's mentioned. Yes.
They're definitely connected. Okay, well,
awesome.
Thank you so much for being our guest
Yeah.
today.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
And we leave our listeners with one final thought. Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole.
Do not be an asshole. Oh, thank you. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Vocal Fries podcast is produced by Chris Ayers for Halftone Audio. Theme music by Nick Granum. You can find us on Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Vocal Fries Pod. You can email us at vocalfriespod@gmail.com.